We are going to look into macros, right? We'll go here, okay? 1 second, let me adjust this video here, okay? So here I've defined a simple macro which is already in user include standard io.h. If you go there, okay, here if you look at here, it's already defined here. So I've just taken that as an example. And what it says is we are instructing the preprocessor, which is part of the compiler, to replace every existence of or occurrence of EOF with parenthesis -1 close parenthesis. It is mainly meant for software management, and you can use EOF instead of -1 because for readability we know what EOF means. We may not know what -1 means. So that's why we use macros. There are also other advantages with macros. We will see how they are done. You can view the output of the preprocessor using GCC -E option. I'll also show that in a minute. And when you use -E option, the executable that a.out is not created. All right. Like I said, instead of writing -1 everywhere in the program, we use EOS. It's much more readable. And in case you were to change -1 to -4 or -5, you only change this file. You don't change your program, all right? And macros are plain textual substitutions. They don't check anything as long as uh, you are defined properly. It just replaces the string. And they do not work like functions. We will see that in a minute. All right. Here, for instance, I've defined a simple program, main, printf, eof, %d, and eof. And if you compile this program with -e option, you would see the output is this. What it does is it replaced eof with -1 because that's what you are defined here. All right, in this case we should see parenthesis here, so let me change here itself. Okay, let's see how it is done. Okay, for instance, let's say eof.c, printf eof is right. Okay, it's a simple function, no fancy. -e option, eof.c, right? And you see here the it ran the preprocessor. It has done a lot of stuff, and this is our program, and it replaced the EOF with -1. All right, so one thing, let me show you the man pages. GCC, if you look at it, you will see it has minus E option, but to get more information about E, you keep scrolling down, but go further down. Okay, we're almost there. Okay, minus E options. It says stop after the pre-processing stage. Do not run the compiler proper. The output is in the form of the pre-processed source code, which is sent to the standard output. Okay, so that's what it is. Oops. It sent the output to the screen, and the preprocessor ran our program, and it replaced every existence of EOF. All right, but it did not replace the substring which occurs in the printf, the first parameter of printf. So basically, anything that occurs as a special identifier or a separate identifier, it will replace it. Okay. If you were to say define EOF, then you figure out if there's a problem is there or not. You can compile it and see. Okay, so basically you need to make sure the if you want to run the preprocessor, a lot of times you may have issues doing the preprocessor, and that is the way to run your uh, preprocessor. Oops, sorry. So the way to run a preprocessor is GCC minus E option. All right. Okay. So that is done. And here I've written another program, has defined maximum 3. I defined a constant or macro to say that every occurrence of maximum, replace that with number 3. So if this is your program, and your preprocessor output would be like this, it should be like this. Okay, here I've used if else and if conditions. I use the same program that we defined here. I've just extended with a more program. Here I've said as if maximum, and this works similar to our if then else conditions, 0, -1, and positive values. So you can run this program and see which part of the code is executed. Change this one to 0, run this program, and change this to -1, run this program. So you would know how different parts of the code get executed. For instance, here I will I've written a simple program. Let me copy this for you guys in a separate slide, and you would know what I'm talking about. Okay, let me include here. Okay, let's go back to our slides. it also, like I said, the same as the previous slide. You change to different values of maximum, you will know what I'm talking about. Same equal conditions that we did in the past. I've used greater than one symbol here. Okay, you can also check for a existence of a macro. All right, the way you check that is, if def macro name, if it's defined, then use the code. You can put a piece of code here, just like we did here. We are using a piece of code to be part of our program. So if you run the preprocessor, only one part of the program will exist, not both. The preprocessor will remove the code based on the outcome of this expression. And if in the industry, what we do is, for instance, if def apple, then you put the code, let's say Objective-C code in here. Else, you can say if it is Windows, do that code here. So when you run your preprocessor, it will not create code for both Apple and Windows in the same executable. Okay. Now you see the difference between if and if def. If is a regular condition. If def is if there is a definition exists. So there are two different types of checking the macros. One is the value, the other one is the existence of a macro. Okay. And using expressions is very important. Here I defined a macro a plus b as a space plus space b. Okay, this is expression. And when then I defined a comma b comma c, three variables, c equal to a plus b, which is our macro, times c. This is the standard example that you would see in many textbooks. So what here is, like I said, it's a textual substitution. So a plus b will be replaced by these two expression a plus b, because the asterisk, which is a multiplication, takes higher precedence than plus. You actually multiply in this case a plus b times c, which is wrong, because the student actually wanted a plus b times c, right? So how do I fix that? We use parenthesis. If you use parenthesis, then when the macro is expands a plus b, you put c equal parenthesis a plus b close parenthesis times c. Then the plus get higher precedence and it works the way it was intended. Parameterized macros. This is also very important. You can pass parameters to your macro. In this case, I've defined area of rectangle a comma b as parenthesis a times parenthesis b. You might want to experiment why I have used parameters in this case, parenthesis in this case, not a regular a times b. But anyway, before we get into that, in the parameterized macros, you have to make sure there is no space between the macro name and the parenthesis. There shouldn't be any space between the name and left parenthesis. Remember that. So this definition is wrong. Okay, this is space here. Why? Because the preprocessor thinks that you have to replace every occurrence of area of rectangle with this entire expression, which is wrong, right? You want to do pass a comma b to the macro and multiply A times B. So the correct definition is area of rectangle with no space, and you have A comma B. And if you run your and there's a simple program here, A equal to 10, B equal to 20, and the area of rectangle is, it expands A comma B as parenthesis A close parenthesis times B within parenthesis. Then you get the right area. In this case, 10 times 20, which is 200, right? So why I need a parameter, parenthesis? Because sometimes you may send expressions just like we saw before. To protect and take the precedence into account, you have to put parenthesis. All right. So when you use macros, especially parameterized macro, always use parenthesis. You can have multiple lines of parameters, multiple lines of macro. In case you, then in that case, you use a backslash. You can continue, you can put a lot of formulas here in multiple lines using backslash, which is very important. All right. You can also undefine macro. Let's say somebody defined a macro and you don't want to, you want to redefine that macro. Then you say, in this case, for example, I've defined maximum equal to 10, and I'm checking here if def, that means if there is a maximum macro defined, then undefine that. That means remove the definition of the macro, which is 10, and then you again redefine itself as 20. All right. And then your program will run. Now it will account 20 instead of 10. So undef macro is, you need to understand that too. And this is a difference version. Okay, this is second version. You can also say if it's not defined, okay. Oh, in this case, I made a mistake, I think. Let me, 1 second. I know where I was. Oh, I was in the last slide. Okay. If it's not defined, you define it. Okay. If it is not defined, you define it be 20 and then close it with endif. So the macros are very easier to understand, and all you got to remember is the use the parenthesis and no space when it comes to parameterized macros. Sometimes you may not uh, take this into account, and you may end up in having a lot of errors during compilation. And let me just, okay, here there's a question I asked you. What is the difference between a function and a macro? Okay, so difference between a macro and a function. Okay, function and a macro. This runs at preprocessor state. All right, and this runs at runtime. We all know that, right? Functions have activation records. I hope you understand activation, right? Or the stack frame, activation record, or stack frame. There's a difference, a lot of names for that. And there's no such thing as in here. Function call requests go to and all that, right? It jumps the code from one place to another, whereas when it comes to macro, it again preprocessor time, it takes textual substitution. You don't have any such things in here, okay? The fourth is you both are parameters you can send, and the scope, you have a lot of issues with the scope and all that, right? And one advantage using macro and one advantage with function, if you go over this issue, you will see sometimes macros are better to use, sometimes functions are not good to use. All right, so can you find or give an example when to use macro, when not to use macro? You can check the internet and experiment it, but give me an example. That is the homework for this uh, macros. Okay. Okay.